Hi, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. We have a special episode for you this week. I have Nathaniel Dunaway here as our guest host for the show. Welcome to the show, Nathaniel.
Hi, thank you for having me, Angela.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so excited to have Nathaniel here on the show. It's his first time on Real Film Snobs. But as we were just discussing a little bit ago, Nathaniel and I first met at Salem Cinema, our local art house theater here in Salem, where Nathaniel's worked for about 4 years. So I think that's when I first met you. And of course, I'm a regular at the theater. And he's an employee there, but we would start talking about movies. And I soon discovered despite his young age and being quite a bit younger than me, but we won't say how much, that he's into, classic films, older films. And so I was super impressed. I thought we would start off, Nathaniel, talk a little bit about your film production company, because in addition to being an employee at Salem Cinema, you also own your own film production company and have made a lot of films.
It's true. Yeah, it's called Body in the Window Seat. I'm 1/3 of Body in the Window Seat. Started it in 2012 with two friends of mine that I went to high school with. At that point, we were just out of high school, but we'd made a lot of short films and things, and we just decided we wanted to put a name to it, put a title to it, and make that sort of our umbrella name for everything we made from that point out. And so we called it Body in the Window Seat. And yeah, we've since then we've made 10 films, short films and feature films. In 2015, we made a Western called Misfortune County that was far too long for any festivals to accept. I'm still very proud of it, but it's a
How long
very,
is it?
it's just under 2 hours.
Oh,
It's a feature. Yeah, it's made for $5,000 just in the summer of 2015. It's one of the things I'm most proud of having made. And at the end of 2015, we were able to show it at the Pine Theater in Prineville, Oregon, which is where I'm from. So yeah, that's a little history of Body in the Window Seat.
and you guys have made some westerns, some horror movies, a mix of genres, correct?
Yes, yeah, wide variety of genres. We started out making westerns. Like I said, Misfortune County is a western, very much inspired by True Grit, and Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is one of my favorite movies. And the reasoning for that, I mean, aside from just loving westerns, is that Prineville is a very small town, a very western town in Central Oregon, and it was just easy to find things to make a western movie. It was easy to find locations. It was easy to use, family members, horses,
Mm-hmm.
and things for the movies. Costume pieces, props. They're all easy to find in a western, rodeo town like that. So that's why we started off with westerns. But moving forward from there, we made comedies. We made a horror film, as you mentioned, a couple thrillers. Yeah, so all sorts of genres. And we've gotten into festivals that are genre specific, like the Flint Fright Fest in Flint, Michigan is a horror festival. But
Seems
also
appropriate for
had,
Flint.
yeah. We've also had shorts accepted into the Oregon Coast Film Festival and the Portland International Film Festival.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been to Prineville, as you know, because I think I hit you up for some restaurant recommendations, and it definitely, unlike a lot of the towns in Central Oregon, which has had so much growth, Prineville still has some of that authentic kind of Old West feel. So it's really cool. Like you can imagine that you would know people that own horses pretty easily out there. So it's really cool. So you mentioned Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Can you also talk about some of your other favorite films? So give people an idea of your taste.
Sorry, Angela.
Oh, sorry. It looks like we got a disconnect there. So can you tell us some more about some of your favorite films of all time besides Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
Yeah. So the name Body in the Window Seat, the name for the production company, is a reference to my favorite film, which is Arsenic and Old Lace. Frank
Cary Grant.
Capra. Yeah, Frank Capra, Cary Grant. Um, that's one that's just I've always loved, and I've always thought it's just one of the funniest movies. Um, Psycho is a huge one for me. That was a very influential movie for making me want to make movies. I sort of always watched black and white films growing up. I'm very thankful that my mom would just put Turner Classic Movies on,
Mm,
because that was a major education for me. But I remember the first time I saw Psycho, it was I'd had this idea of what a black and white movie would be like, the kind of things that would happen in a black and white movie,
hmm.
and that movie just sort of blew up all of those preconceived notions, and like legitimately shocked me when as a kid. I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11 when I saw Psycho.
That was just
um
a few years ago, folks. But anyway,
yeah.
just kidding. Yeah, Psycho's a great one, and that led. I mean, we one of the things when I first met you, you were doing your Hitchcock project, and so Nathaniel is, I think, still the only person I've ever met who's watched every single Hitchcock movie ever made. I've watched most of them, but you watched everything, including the silent movies, in order, if I remember correctly. And I remember that you had some very wise words about that project because it was pretty educational. It sounds like.
It was very educational. Yeah, I'm glad I did it. I mean, Hitchcock has always been my favorite filmmaker, starting with watching Psycho as a kid, as I mentioned. Um, but I love Rear Window. I love Rope, um, Shadow of a Doubt, Strangers on a Train, Lady Vanishes. But I'd realized that it was all of those that I was just rewatching when it came to
Hmm.
Hitchcock. And then so yeah, I was reading Truffaut's book on Hitchcock, where it's an interview that it just goes through every film, and I decided, well, it's almost January, I'm going to spend 2018, or was it 2019? Now I'm not even sure when I did that. Um, just watching them all in order. I'm going to start in January. There's 53 movies, so if I can average out to one a week, maybe a little faster, then I can get
Hmm.
this year. And the thing about watching all 53 Alfred Hitchcock movies in order is that the beginning and the end are pretty rough.
Yeah.
Um, but that middle, the 1950s in particular, where there's a movie, he released 11 movies in the decade of the 1950s. That's
That are all
really
just classics. Yeah.
right, exactly. Yeah.
But that's what he's known for. And so it is, I mean, I think talking to you, you were feeling as a filmmaker, it was kind of heartening because you realized, oh, like Hitchcock made some really not very great movies and quite a few of them early on in his career that were kind of, but he was allowed to kind of mature and grow as an artist and make better movies as he went on. And these days it's like, it seems like if someone doesn't, jump out of the gate, their first film amazing, they're not given a lot of chances. And
Right.
so,
Yeah. Like today, we're going to talk about a Soderbergh movie. And I mean, Soderbergh, Orson Welles, too. They're those filmmakers that out of the gate made something that blew people's
amazing.
mind. And Hitchcock didn't. He made things that did make money, but they were by no means very memorable movies. I mean, he started out with silent films. Um, and I mean, the great thing about watching them too is finding the gems that aren't really talked about. I think The Wrong Man is an amazing movie that I think
Hmm.
is not remembered. Um, there's a few others like that are really really impressive, or have very impressive like sequences, and you can see, at the start of his career, you can see um, what he's going to become. You can see him planting those
Right.
things,
The
and
seeds
just
of the
themes. Yeah, themes that you notice: constant trains,
Right.
blondes, you know, like all of these
Yeah.
things that are going to
There they
come
are
up.
in the early 30s, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. And of course his mid period is all the famous films. Notorious is my personal favorite Hitchcock movie, and not, you know, usually the one most people cite, but that's my favorite. So we should start the show. So we've got 5 movies for you this week. And Nathaniel picked 3 of these, and then I picked 2, and hopefully we got some good selections. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about some of these. So we'll move on to our first movie, which is Let Them All Talk. And this is indeed Steven Soderbergh's newest directorial effort. This is about an author played by Meryl Streep who takes her 2 college best friends and her nephew on a cruise while she's coming to term with her past. As I mentioned, Meryl Streep plays the lead character, but the co-stars, her 2 best friends are played by Diane Wiest and Candice Bergen. And wow, talk about 2 women I've not seen in films in a while. And I actually didn't even know Diane Wiest was in this because I had just seen Meryl Streep on the poster and I hadn't read a lot about this before watching it. And then I started watching it and she appeared on the screen and I got really happy. um, and
Same.
then Lucas Hedges, who for a while there seemed to be in like 20 movies a year, plays the young nephew. And then Gemma Chan plays I guess she's the publicist for Meryl Streep's character's book company, publishing company. So this is such an interesting movie that Steven Soderbergh directed this, because this is essentially sort of like a female comedy drama. You know, it's a mostly female cast, and you know, at first I was a little worried going into it because I thought, oh, it's going to be the Meryl Streep show. And Meryl Streep for me is, I know people worship upon the throne of Meryl Streep in Hollywood and other places, but she's kind of hit or miss for me actually, and her films are often not the best. But she did work with Soderbergh, you know, really recently before, and did some good work with him. So I was excited about that. For me, what I loved about this movie was the dynamic between the 3 women who are all very, very different. And Candice Bergen in particular, I thought kind of basically almost steals the movie. Her character, who's like this sassy woman who lives in Texas, who has not done so well in life. She is not as well off. Meryl Streep's character is a very famous author, very financially successful. Candice Bergen's character is exactly the opposite, and she's in a different place in her life and very different type of personality. And I found the tension between the 2 of them the most interesting part of the movie. So I'm curious
Yeah,
to see what you thought because you recommended this one.
I
I mean, this
did.
is one you wanted to review.
um, yeah, I really liked this movie.
Oh,
I'm a big Soderbergh fan. I just think he, like, as a filmmaker myself, he's exciting because he just never repeats himself. I
mm-hmm.
can't think of any 2 Soderbergh movies that I think are identical or even close to identical, and I'm including the trilogy of movies he made. Ocean's 13 is nothing like Ocean's 12, is
Oh,
nothing like Ocean's 11. They're just very different. And so I'm always excited to see what he's doing. And so I was excited for this. I had heard that it was largely improvised. Um, I'd heard that it was that shot almost entirely on an ocean liner. So just going
mm-hmm.
in with those like gimmicks, I was like, all right, I'm ready for this movie. Um, but yeah, for me, it was really, I just loved that it really is a movie about friendship, but
Mm-hmm.
not strong friendship. Does that make sense? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
about companionship more so than friendship. It's about people who've been in your life for a long time, but you
Right.
don't necessarily have a strong relationship with them. Um, yeah, and so I was just really engrossed the whole time. Um, and jealous, frankly, of Lucas Hedges for just getting to hang out with those 3 to make
Yeah.
this movie.
To be in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just kind of playing yeah, and he's just along for the ride and he does good with the part he has. His character is you know, really overshadowed by these 3 really strong female personalities, which I thought was really refreshing to see. And
Yeah.
again, like you said, Soderbergh does not repeat himself. I would not have guessed this would be a kind of material he'd be attracted to necessarily, but then he's done so much. I think he just likes the challenge, and I think he probably likes working with Streep. They worked really well together on their last movie, which I didn't write the name down of, but the one that was about the Panama Papers. Um, and so he likes improvising, working with strong actors. And the three performances here, Meryl Streep's character is actually, and to me, for my taste, incredibly unlikable. Her character in this
Right.
movie, I mean, she's just grating. She's a snob, and the worst, not in the good sense, like real film snobs, but in a kind of a bad way. And so
Yeah,
there's a lot of great reactions between her and Candice Bergen's character, which I just adored. And I just so excited to see these women on screen after, being, of course, because they're of a certain age, not on screen for a long time. So this was fun.
sure. Yeah, and I love Diane Wiest. I mean, The
I
Bird
do too. I
Cage is
adore
one of
her.
my favorite movies. And so just to see her, and her character sort of has the lowest stakes of any
Hmm.
of the characters, and in that way she seems the happiest. And
Right.
and so that was nice to just kind of see her like chilling out for a whole movie.
Well, she's also sort of, it's like that when you have a trio of friends. I also thought that was very authentic. There's always one who's sort of like the one in the middle between the two dominating personalities. The
Right.
Meryl Streep character and Candice Bergen are a little bit more narcissistic and a little bit stronger personalities. And she's like the nicer friend who's always kind of volleying between the two of them.
Mhm.
And it's often like that with friendships, especially when you have a trio like that. I find that there's one person who has to play the mediator of it. So I thought that was very authentic portrayal. So yeah, I can recommend it. For me, it's like a 3-star movie, but I'm not sure where you're at with that on a 4-star scale.
I gave it 3 stars as well. I don't think the improv style works quite all the time, but
Hmm.
it's mostly just the fact that a movie like this got made. I mean, it's
Oh
just
yeah. Hmm.
how do you pitch something like this?
Well, you
It's
get
the
Meryl Streep to sign on, I think, is how you get it done.
right, yeah, that's true. And it might be kind of a fun time capsule moving forward, because who knows how popular cruises and ocean liners are going to be. But
Hopefully not very much.
yeah,
I've never liked
that
them
is a
anyway, but
it's a nice, I mean, the setting of the movie is just beautiful. Like it just
right. It's
the
like
idea
no
of,
cruise ship any of us will ever get to afford to be on. It's a very, very luxury cruise
yeah,
line. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Okay, so we'll move on to our next movie, which is Mank by director David Fincher. This is about screenwriter Herman Mankiewicz's rush to complete the screenplay for Citizen Kane while battling his own demons, including alcoholism. And or Mankiewicz, as he's known in the movie, is played by Gary Oldman in a very good performance, which we come to expect from Gary Oldman. Now, this is a very interesting movie. This is for film people like me and Nathaniel. This is like the golden age of Hollywood, 1930s, and so this is really set with all these kind of big, larger than life characters. You have William Randolph Hearst and Louis B. Mayer and David O. Selznick and Irving Thalberg, and if those names mean nothing to you, that probably means you're not a huge fan of 30s classic cinema. But this is in this time period where the movie industry was starting to change a little bit, becoming a little bit more corporate, but you still had these very large personalities like Louis B. Mayer, who were head of these studios, and Herman Mankiewicz's character, he's kind of this. I don't know how you'd call it, but he's this guy who everyone invites to the parties because he always has something witty to say and he stirs things up. But he's he's a screenwriter and it seems like he's fairly successful, but he's kind of on the downward edge of his career when he's commissioned to write Citizen Kane. The thing that's been controversial about this movie is, there's people that are, of course, into the auteur theory who feel like, it takes away from Orson Welles' contribution to Citizen Kane. And whether this movie is very accurate or not, I mean, I think is not less important. It is a movie; it's fictional. So, then the fact that it's showing this kind of bygone era of how films used to be made in a very specific way. So I enjoyed it. I did not love it, but I'll get into that in a minute because I'm anxious to see what you think.
Yeah, I didn't love this movie either. Um, it's probably like a 2.5 out of 4 or something like that. I think you're right. It's definitely certain aspects of it are catnip for movie people,
Hmm.
um, but it's definitely not like top 3 Fincher or anything. It's definitely a Fincher movie. But I don't know. I feel like it was lacking something. And a big part of it is that it feels a little bit like a Hollywood fantasy,
Hmm.
but without like really, making that its whole personality, the way like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's like obvious that it's a
That's kind of
fantasy.
same.
This I would put in the same category as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I don't know, presents itself, I think, as being a little bit more factual than I
It
think it
actually
actually
is.
is. Yeah,
Yeah, it presents itself almost like a biopic, which I think is certainly, I mean, most of the historians have said this theory that Orson Welles didn't really write Citizen Kane is actually incorrect. So this is based on a false theory. To me, I think part of the problem, and I'm like, Fincher is one of those directors, he's like 50-50 for me. I either love his films, love Zodiac, or I just can't stand them. I mean, he's just one or the other for me. And he's a very cold director, and and I don't and that can work for the right material. I think actually in The Social Network it really worked, his
mm,
style, his kind of analytical, cold style. Um, I think in this film, the 30s is not a cold time. This was a very hot time in Hollywood cinema. And so to me, his aesthetic doesn't work for the material. I mean, these are really strong, fiery personalities. Louis B. Mayer, Hearst, Thalberg, these people, yeah, some of them were creeps and some of them were jerks, but these are also people that made some of the greatest movies ever made. And unlike a lot of the studio heads today, they were true movie lovers. A lot of them really were
definitely.
invested in what they were making. And you just don't feel that when you're watching the movie the way I would have liked that. I actually thought the best character in the movie was Amanda Seyfried playing Marion Davies. She, to me, was the heart and soul of the movie. She's the only one who gave the kind of warmth I would have been hoping for.
Definitely. Yeah, I thought Amanda Seyfried was terrific. I mean, we've kind of not yet mentioned what the movie is spends the most time on, which is the 1934 California governor's race.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, which may sound strange, but that really is like the through line of the movie is part of the story is Mankiewicz writing Citizen Kane,
Hmm.
mostly bedridden with a broken leg. And then there's flashbacks to the governor's race between Merriam and Upton Sinclair, and the way that Louis B. Mayer's involvement in that and William Randolph Hearst's involvement in that governor's race influenced Mank and made him want to write, that
Citizen
into.
Kane, yeah. Yeah, and that was a
Um,
crucial turning point, right? Because Upton Sinclair was a very left-leaning guy who was very popular with the unions, and people like Louis B. Mayer and these folks, they wanted to crush him at any cost. They did not want a lefty in as the governor of California, and so it shows that kind of collaboration between the political side and Hollywood. And how those vested interests, play out in this, and Gary Oldman's character Mankiewicz is very um, kind of dismayed at what he's seeing, I think.
right. I think the most you mentioned that time as being, a very magical time as far as movie making goes, and I think the really the only part of that film that really taps into that is the walk, the sort of walk and talk with Louis B. Mayer, where he's sort of talking about, the business of the movies, but also the
Hmm.
magic of the movies, and
Right,
and the way scripts need to affect him if he's going to make them,
right.
um but the movie really isn't that much about making movies.
Okay. Well, I'm getting the 5 minute mark, which is crazy because we have three movies left. So we might need to, if we need to, what we'll do, Nathaniel, is we'll cut the last movie and save it for another future episode, maybe. So let's move on
Okay.
to your next movie then.
Okay, so the other movie we watched is Lady from Shanghai, which is of 1947, directed by Orson Welles, starring Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth. And it is a film noir about an Irishman played by Welles, who sort of by happenstance, as often happens in noir, meets this woman, saves her life in Central Park, and from there gets a job working on the yacht that her husband is chartering to Mexico, I believe,
Hmm.
and things unfold from there.
Yeah, just leave it at that because this is a not a well. Don't even. That was an amazing job summarizing the plot of that movie.
It's a confusing movie. It's that's the first thing I'll say, is that it's a confusing movie.
Had you seen this before, Nathaniel? Before we reviewed
No,
it? Oh,
no,
interesting.
I hadn't. I wanted to watch an Orson Welles movie, kind of to pair that with Mank. Yeah.
Well, I love this movie actually, and I just watched it again so I could refresh my memory for the show. But the story doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes more sense the second time, so I will say that. But this movie is about this amazing visuals that Wells just has in here. And this was a movie very famously, like most of his projects, with the exception of Citizen Kane, that the studio butchered. They cut it to pieces, and that's one of the reasons it doesn't make a lot of sense, is because how they edited it. But he still got to keep some of his great photography in there, including the famous funhouse mirror sequence at the end, which is one of the great sequences in all of cinema, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's I mean, it made me, that and the aquarium sequence to me felt very Hitchcockian. They felt like these great like set pieces. The fun house is a great climax, very memorable climax, and I won't spoil it, but sort of what the sort of last character standing does at the end of the movie is very noir and very memorable.
Oh yeah.
It it's just and you're right, the visuals, even from just the close-ups of just very sweaty, sinister people,
Right, on the
is
boat. Yeah. Yeah,
right.
very
There's a lot of
memorable.
that's great.
So how many stars are you giving it?
I'm giving I'm giving Lady from Shanghai 2.5 stars out of 4.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Harsh,
it's
harsh
just
critic.
I love noir. It's not about noir, and I love Orson Welles too. And that may be the problem, is that I went into this with pretty high expectations, loving the genre and the director. Um, I just don't. I feel like that middle section where it becomes a courtroom drama, um,
It's a little
bogged
bit.
it bogged it down for me. But you are right. Visually, it's a very stunning movie and very memorable.
So I'm
Mhm.
getting the wrap up sign from Brad here, so we've got to go. I seem like it went by so fast. I feel like I need to have you on so we can review some more movies and talk some more, Nathaniel. I'm going to do the quickest wrap up of all time. And first of all, thank Nathaniel for being my guest on the show. Really appreciate it. You can check out our reviews at realfilmsnobs.com. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day and great movies.